That'd be
For
great.
purposes of the videotape, I'll just say that we're talking to City Councilwoman Mary Verner, who's a candidate for mayor. And with that in mind, Mary, do you want to just kind of give us the overview?
Well, I think the overarching topic of the board discussion today probably should be a pace of making a tangible difference in our community character. And I approached my candidacy to become Spokane's next mayor with an admonition that I've held dear for many years, more than I'd like to admit. It's, Buckminster Fuller admonished all of us years ago, think globally and act locally. And I believe here in the city of Spokane, we all have such an opportunity to do that. And in my time here, and particularly my time on council, I've grown a bit impatient with our pace of acting locally. I see so many opportunities for city government to be a catalyst for positive change, and I'm eager to be in a position to have a greater influence on that change. For specific issues, I don't know if you want me to start rolling into topics.
Why don't you do that if you would, and if you can kind of touch the high points, we might want to come back and elaborate on some of them, but yeah, do that.
Okay. Let me give some examples then of where I feel that we really need to proceed. And the themes of my campaign are people, place, and purpose, which might seem a bit generic for a typical campaign, but I believe that where you start from is actually determines where you're going to go in your leadership. So when I think about the need to proceed with our people, I look at the immediate crisis that's facing us with displacement of downtown low income. And I think that's a prime example of what I mean about putting our people foremost in the mayor's considerations. Because if my purpose in the mayor's office is to serve the people of Spokane, that means all of the people of Spokane. So that whenever I'm faced with a decision or a policy or a direction for management of the city, I'm going to be looking at how does this affect everyone? So that when we invite new development, we certainly do that with open arms because we're helping to bolster our economy. At the same time, I think it's the mayor's job to carefully consider, okay, what are all the ramifications, positive and negative, on our people? Have we coordinated this major new development with our school systems, with our social service providers, with our workforce development crew, so that we actually put our people first and let the people drive the dollars? I'm very eager to put into place a comprehensive program for tax increment financing and all the other economic incentives that we offer. In fact, I think we have great models that we can look at in redevelopment boards, such as the Portland Development Authority or the Boise Capital City Project, where there is a comprehensive and very deliberate approach to redevelopment. And we don't have that yet. I'm already proceeding and pulling a small group together. With the authorities available to me as mayor, I will have even more of an opportunity to bring together the stakeholders who really can contribute to pulling together a redevelopment authority, whatever we choose to call it, that has the right mix of disciplines and that has the sole purpose of facilitating the market so that their job of the redevelopment authority is to do exactly what I just described, to make sure that when we bring the money to Spokane, that we deliberately look at how the money will be used to foster community and take care of all of our people. So I don't know if you want me to pause as I go along or keep rolling along here.
Let me do this, because I know how fast the time can go, and we don't want to deprive you the opportunity to touch on everything. There is a point I would like to be sure I raise, and it probably isn't going to be on anybody's agenda, but it deals with the issue of open records and open government.
Yes.
And there is on the city's current legislative agenda an item that talks directly about that, and it seems to be promoting a fairly expansive view of things that could be exempt from disclosure. And this was adopted by the city. I don't remember how it was handled in terms of a member-by-member vote, whether you voted for it or not, but I'm just wondering if you support that language and if you support that approach.
I did, in fact, notice that item in our legislative agenda and raised some questions about it, although ultimately I did vote to go ahead with the legislative agenda package. That one made me somewhat nervous. I have to say that I wasn't real comfortable with the intent behind that particular legislative item. I do understand the city attorney's desire to have clear sideboards so that there is some clarity when public records requests are made about what should be exempt and what should not be. Right now we have this rather vague threshold of whatever is confidential because it's privileged. And I think we use sort of a legal terminology of what's privileged and confidential as the attorneys would. And so we're looking at it strictly from an attorney point of view, when I would like to have the discussion with the city attorney and the attorney general and our state legislature about what can we do to protect the truly confidential information that's the equivalent to HIPAA, or that has the information has the ability to actually damage an individual's life in a way that's unfair to them.
Well, let me interrupt with a question. And if you look at the original Public Disclosure Act, which was adopted as an initiative and did specify, I think, 4 or 5 different exemptions, would you say that that did an inadequate job of identifying the areas that could be treated as confidential?
Well, here's the challenge, though. Apparently, our attorneys feel that there is still information that that they feel needs to be protected, and that they felt that the act was inadequate to protect. And I need to do more discussion with city attorneys about that. I would my policy direction to the city attorneys would always be, give it to them unless you can explain to me as the mayor why you would not want to give it to them. Them being the press, the public, an individual citizen off the street.
I want to zero in on one word. You said, unless you would not want to give it to them.
No, unless the mayor would,
Right.
You'd have to explain to the mayor why you would not give it to them.
But is that something short of saying, we'll give it to them unless the law absolutely compels us not to?
Let's see, unless the law absolutely compels us not to. I would think that that would be the policy, that we should give it unless the law absolutely compels us not to. And how do you see the legislative agenda as being, trying to thwart that? I guess we need to have this conversation separately.
And maybe we could, but for example, it talks about the one that we hear about a lot is work time, attorney-client and work product privilege, which is a great tactic. If you want to keep something quiet, you bring in an attorney to sit down and be a part of the discussion, and then it suddenly becomes attorney-client privilege and is withheld, when it really isn't about legal strategy or how we're going to present our case or whatever it is.
Well, even in the world of work product law and work product privilege, that's a topic of constant conversation these days. You pick up the Washington State Bar Association Journal, and there's a lot of dialogue now about what is the meaning of work product and privilege in this electronic age. So I think we have to be nimble enough to try to fulfill the intent of the law, which is to disclose as much as possible. We are the government, we are supposed to be public. And so I'd certainly be willing to explore that and have a standing policy that our intent is to fulfill the law.
Thank you. So I did interrupt where you were going. But
No, that's okay. And related to that really is, what does transparency mean exactly? And what would fulfill a community desire for more transparency in local government? And you could have many definitions of that, despite what you might hear regarding some others taking attribution for the ethics ordinance. I, in fact, actually convened the first discussion about the ethics ordinance and brought over the representative from Seattle to speak with us. And from that first workshop, we led into an ethics ordinance. I also have been a big proponent for producing public records, and I can't really disclose what goes on in executive sessions, but I can tell you that in executive session I'm always a proponent for releasing as much information as possible. But beyond that, I believe that we've had this dissatisfaction with governmental transparency. It's a lack of communication as much as it is a lack of transparency. Because so often you really don't know what's going on at City Hall. In spite of the fact that we do have public relations staff who are on our payroll, I don't know how often you receive press releases. I don't know how often we just voluntarily communicate with you. But as a city council person, it seems like we really don't release a lot of information. When there's something newsworthy going on in just about every office at City Hall every day, I would much rather have you delete our communication because you just have too much and it's not interesting to you, than for you to have to call the city and say, I heard this through the grapevine, or I understand you're doing this. I want you to have as much information as you can handle from the city, good and bad. We just need to keep the public informed, and to consider the media to be our partner in getting that information out is really an approach that I want to take as mayor.
I know that we've talked before about the issue involving lifting the property tax lid, and as chairman of the finance committee, you have some thoughts about that. Do we know enough now to be, for you as a municipal leader, to be able to make a recommendation to the voters? You need to vote to extend this levy lid lift?
I don't feel that I know enough yet, but I'm really close. In fact, I have been spending the last 2 weeks meeting with individuals who are a lot smarter about budget projections than I, and I'm asking the City Council's assistant to set up meetings for me with individuals in the field who are economic forecasters. In fact, they are members of the mayor's economic forecasting team, to let me know whether or not my approach is a valid one. And there are two alternatives that I'm considering putting forward right now. One would be to indicate by our 6-year projections, at least 6-year projections, not the term of a mayor in office, but beyond a term. Will our 6-year projections allow us to sustain levels of service without a levy lid lift? If we're not able to sustain adequate levels of service without a levy lid lift, then what mechanisms, what two choices do we have? We either allow levels of service to further deteriorate, or we have to ask the public to help us. But interestingly, in these conversations at the Finance Committee, which is where we're supposed to come up with solutions, a third solution has emerged. And that would be that we would go to a long-term budgeting method that would deliberately take our surpluses in good years, bank it, knowing that we anticipate deficiencies in out years. And what's the key difference from the way we've done business in the past is that when we've had a deficiency, we've made cuts. When we've had a surplus, we've gone on a spending spree. If we take this approach in our good years and look at long-term budgeting instead of short-term budgeting, we may be able to smooth out over a period of years without the levy lid lift, maybe. And it's those assumptions underlying that third option that I want to explore with the people who are a lot smarter than I am, who are the economic forecasters.
So the idea would be to tie this money up in something like a stabilization account of some
Yes.
sort?
We do rate stabilization, exactly that, with our enterprise funds, where we know we have huge capital outlays for the solid waste facility, for example, or the wastewater treatment facility. But we've not done that with our general fund. We've tended to do cyclical, and I think it's no coincidence that the cycles coincide with election years. So I'd like to get us beyond that, where it really is removed as much as possible from political cycles and is put into a mechanism that may be able to smooth our budget over a period of years.
How do you arrive at the proper level, or what you think the proper level of staffing is for the police department?
I look to the experts in the police department to tell me.
Now?
I think we don't. I do not think we have enough police right now. In fact, I think one of our greatest losses was the school resource officers. And as we watch increases in crime and as we watch increases in gang activity, particularly the juvenile, I'll call them gang wannabes because I'm not sure they legitimately qualify as gang members. But that early intervention piece really is gang prevention that I think we have lost as a result of not having our school resource officers in place. So I would like to be able to restore the school resource officers, beef up the neighborhood resource officers, and then provide the additional patrol staff, detectives, and support staff that the chief feels she needs to really do adequate policing in the city of Spokane.
And that crime check solution, what would be your solution to restoring crime check?
I think we have
funding
to.
That.
We need to budget for that as part of a level of service that's what I refer to is non-discretionary. You know, in the federal world, we have discretionary and non-discretionary funding, and I would consider these basic services to be non-discretionary, and therefore we have to budget for them. When we went through this priorities of government budgeting exercise, We use different terminology, but I think we were getting at the same concept, which is certain service levels are fundamental, and they are the purpose of government. We're supposed to provide public safety, which is fire and police. And we're supposed to provide streets and infrastructure, make sure that your water is clean and your toilets flush. But if we don't adequately budget for those, then we fall below levels of service that are acceptable to the taxpayers.
So you disagree with the matrix that said we can do with 10 fewer officers?
That matrix recommendation was was too simplistic. And it compared the city of Spokane to a best management practice in a community that, or a series of communities that really didn't face our circumstances here in Spokane. So yes, I do disagree with matrix recommendation. Now, Chief Kirkpatrick has been working toward a revamped shift model that is not exactly what matrix recommended, but is something that she feels is workable and actually meets her needs. So when that comes out of her office, I believe it's something that we all should support, because she has tailored it to Spokane's needs rather than the needs of the comparable communities that were used by matrix.
And I do one more quick, and that's the Ombudsman's Office, and how you stand on either supporting or not supporting that, and how can we get this done knowing that we still have bargaining with police units.
I asked Chief Kirkpatrick that same question this morning in our Public Safety Committee meeting, and she does want to conclude the current contract negotiations, and that's understandable because we're way past the point where additional bargaining items could have been added to the contract negotiations. That passed at least a year ago. But as soon as that contract is ratified, and I hope that will be in August, then I would like for her to move into bargaining the ombudsman position and a citizen oversight board with the police guild. Now, I know there's going to be reluctance there. I know because I speak with guild members quite often about this, and their concern is oversight run amok, where they are not given any leeway to do their jobs and protect public safety. So it's important for us to approach the ombudsman position and citizen oversight being well aware that the officers are concerned about too many people looking over their necks and criticizing their every move. Now, I think the ombudsman is necessary because the ombudsman is not there just to look over their shoulder or just to hear citizens' complaints. As I understand the proposal that was made by Sam Palka, the consultant that was brought in, she recommended that we have an ombudsman's office really to organize our perpetual upgrading and oversight of our policies, our training mechanisms, our community interface, so that it's not always a complaint-driven model, but in fact is an interface between the police department and the community to help us constantly improve the way we do policing in Spokane. And that's why I support it. I think it really institutionalizes something that we need to make constant incremental change in the police department.
I'd like to bring you back to the low-income housing crisis downtown to find out what you think would be the best solutions now that the problem is here. What would be some solutions, some actions the city could take, and how would you go about implementing them?
Our immediate crisis has no good solutions. It really doesn't. There is no housing stock available for the interim immediate need for these individuals. And so I guess at this point I am relying on the individuals who always seem to create miracles to find temporary places for these individuals. I hope that RenCorp and Chris Batten, its principal, will allow extra time for us to find solutions for the tenants of the New Madison and the Otis. And he has expressed a willingness to engage with us in good faith to find some time for us to place these individuals. So then what do we do when we get beyond this immediate crisis? What do we do to complete this cycle of crisis is immediately start getting more stock in place, more housing stock for low income. And while a task force has been appointed, the pace of that task force has to be pretty much sprint immediately toward the finish line. I feel that the human services agencies who've been asked to solve the problem need a lot of support, and from all of us all of us should take responsibility. All of us who've helped create the problem need to be a part of solving the problem. And so I think that it's patently unfair to ask all the social service agencies to find more resources from their very slim coffers to solve the problem. Rencourt is not the bad guy here. Chris Batten is not the bad guy. There's no one bad guy. Collectively, all of our redevelopment efforts in Spokane have led us to this point. So I believe it's incumbent upon us as a city to reach out to the other downtown developers who have incrementally made these units not available. 5 here, 10 there. There's no longer any low income housing stock downtown. And again, I've already started making some contacts with some of those individuals, and I'm sure you would recognize the names of the other downtown developers, and just asking them, what can you contribute to this? Then I had contacted the veterans organizations, the VFW, and Ed Neunhertz, who serves as the Armed Forces Committee Chair, to say, is there anything the military can bring to bear to help solve this solution? Once again, it's pulling together those interdisciplinary perspectives on the discussion so that everyone can contribute something to try to solve the problem.
Can I shift gears?
Oh, well, I just had one more question that, if you don't mind, Becky. Our Kids Are Business project that we spent a month exploring in April here in the community. What steps, what role do you think the city ought to play in keeping kids safe, all of the kids of our city?
Mm-hmm.
And what steps would you take as mayor to pursue that?
Well, you touched, Jamie, on exactly the role of a mayor and the role that I would like to take, because it's vitally important for a mayor to exhibit leadership on the essential issues in a city. And by leadership, what I mean is helping to formulate the vision and the goal, and being constantly present in pulling together all of the parties who are necessary to help solve that goal. Constantly present, not through delegated staff, but the mayor's presence, I think, is essential. And I am completely committed to doing that. And when I referred earlier to the gang prevention effort that I believe is so necessary for a community, it ties directly back to our children, our business, because the partners who need to be at the table in gang prevention include the foster care agencies and the child care agencies, because we have young children who are being inoculated into gang life in their early years, whether it's because their parents are behaving as gangsters or because they are neglected to a point that their lives begin to deteriorate so that they really are left with few choices. So to directly answer your question, the mayor's role is essential: to show up, to convene the appropriate parties, and to keep the topic going after it's no longer on the front pages of the newspaper, because that's really the heart of our community. And so the mayor's passion for solving the problem has to be real, and it has to be heartfelt, and it has to be sustained. And I can assure you that that is an issue I care about very deeply, and it's one that I will take a leadership role in.
Real quick on pools first, and then Albee, maybe 30 seconds each. Our solution to pools, and then Albee Stadium.
I think that a bond is really the solution for aquatics facilities, and I believe our taxpayers will support an aquatics bond. I hope that the park board will move that bond onto the ballot this fall. As you may know, last week at the Finance Committee, I really appreciate having some authority as a chair of a committee, and so as the chair of the Finance Committee, I invited the Board of County Commissioners over, and all 3 commissioners attended. And what we're trying to do is coordinate the items that we anticipate coming before the voters. And it looks like, except for the general election and whatever may come out of Mr. Iman or other initiatives, that our fall ballot might be relatively uncomplicated. So I think that probably this fall ballot would be an ideal time to put aquatics on the ballot. We will have just endured a summer without adequate aquatics facilities, so I would like to see them move forward with that.
And what would it pay for? Sorry, just
Community pools and an indoor swimming facility.
right. Okay. Albee,
Absolutely.
30 seconds on Albee.
Yeah, those are the basics: community
Great.
pools
Okay.
and an indoor swimming facility. On Albee Stadium, there is going to be a final plan that should be brought forward to us in August. I've been somewhat reticent with the plans that have been brought forward thus far because I felt that they were a little bit ambiguous. There wasn't enough specificity in the plans that were brought forward, and we still had a lot of community dissatisfaction about what was and was not addressed. I think over the intervening weeks, by the time that comes forward again, some of those issues will have been at least identified and a strategy in place. We cannot meet everyone's needs, but we can let everyone know that we recognize their needs and that we will in fact pursue a strategy to meet those needs. And then for the financing on Joe Albi, I think we'd probably be looking at next spring before we could find a financing mechanism, and that also might be to go out to the voters, but I wouldn't want to hinder the aquatics facilities by placing too many requests for the taxpayers on the same ballot. And so I would not vote in favor of putting Albi and aquatics on the same ballot for my fear that aquatics would fail.
Thank you.
If I could just follow up on that, because it's occurred to me for a long time. We are paying off one street bond with the assumption that it will do so much, and the next time around there's still lots of need. That one still won't be paid off, and the next street bond will be presented to the voters. We're talking about rebuilding the pool system with bonds. The schools are constantly asking for money. We're talking about a levy lift possibly to provide funding for city government, and there's also talk about the equivalent of a special levy for cities. Do you have, or do you know anybody who does have a sense for when we reach saturation point, when the capacity of the voters to continue to say, I'll pay higher taxes is going to be reached?
I think it will be reached soon, unless we start to educate the public about what our circumstances are in Spokane. Because next to Vancouver, Spokane has the lowest general fund per capita in the state of Washington. And what that means is that we really are trying to provide services without enough money to provide those services. Do I think the taxpayers can really bear any more? Well, no, particularly our low-income taxpayers simply feel that they can't bear to pay anymore. Part of that affordable housing dilemma that we face is their property values are going up, even though they have no intention perhaps of selling their home into the market. And so their property taxes are going up because their assessed value is going up, and they feel they're getting the same services. So saturation point, well, we need to have that community dialogue about what are you getting, what are you paying for, where should we really be adjusting our taxes. I believe we need to adjust the utility taxes, but we have to wean ourselves off of our utility taxes because we're so dependent on them to sustain the city budget that our most regressive tax is the one we rely on the most. So what I want to do as mayor is to start assuming that our populace is smart enough to get it if we will give them the information. If I can understand the budget after a period of education, I know that everybody else in Spokane who has a desire to can understand it. And out of that education effort, I believe that we will either, one, have an increased tolerance for taxes, or two, people will come up with better ideas that we should take into full consideration in the city of Spokane.
Is there anything that you came in wanting to say, because I did interrupt you in the middle of the list,
Oh,
that we
no.
didn't give you a chance to?
This isn't really a list, it's just kind of to prompt me about all the many things that I want to do as the mayor of Spokane. And again, I feel primarily that I'm eager to get started, because the topics that are included in this book really are topics that come forth from our citizens. The need to proceed on environmental issues, the need to proceed on economic strategies that are comprehensive, that look at all the opportunities and all the downsides, the need to proceed with our social service activities, the need for social equity, the need for us to do diversity outreach. I mean, everything that has been identified to me as a city council person, as a citizen, as a mayoral candidate, this notebook is all about things that people just want to have some leadership and move forward with those. So I feel that it's really been a blessing in my life that I've accumulated a set of skills and a desire for community service to put me in a position to run for mayor of Spokane at this time. And as mayor, I'm ready to hit the ground running. I would love to start in November proceeding with all of these things that we need to proceed.
Well, Mary, thanks for doing it.
Thank you very much for your time.
Really